What unusual thing did your parents do that you didn't realize was weird until you got older? My stepmom taking me to random guys' houses while my dad was at work and spending 2 hours in said guy's bedroom without coming out and telling me to only knock on the door if there's an emergency. They needed to concentrate while playing dominoes. Kids can be incredibly distracting. Not have friends over. My parents never had friends for dinner. In the rare event they did, it was a stressful affair with lots of yelling and house cleaning and more yelling until the guests arrived. Then things were uncomfortable and formal until they left again. I didn't know adults went to each other's houses. I thought only kids did that until I was 18 or so and realized other people's parents have friends. My parents never had or have friends over, only their siblings. They made yearly trips up to Canada to stock up on codeine and muscle relaxants. I always thought it was fun lying to the border guards, but my sister was a total narc. My parents would give her Dramamine 30 minutes before we hit the border so that she'd be asleep when we dealt with the guards and wouldn't give us away with her guilty face. Growing up we rarely had shampoo. It was usually dish soap, the cheapest kind too. Crystal white. I grew up thinking I had really bad hair. Turns out just needed some shampoo. Wait until you discover conditioner. Drank every single day. They always seemed more fun and laid back in the evenings. Wasn't allowed to drink Kool-Aid at other people's houses because of Johnstown. This was in the 90s though, so I had no idea what the heck she was talking about. Growing up we never went to Dairy Queen. We would instead buy a case of ice cream bars at the grocery store and sit in the car eating them. Family of 5, 24 pack. You got however many you could eat. Beer, they were all melted or gone. Fast forward to one of my older sister's first dates with her now husband. He suggested they go out for ice cream. She was driving so they went to a grocery store. At this point he's thinking, okay, we're going to get it and head back to the apartment. They check out and head to the car. Trying to impress her, he opens the door for her and lets her in, then walks around the car. By the time he sits down, she's on bar number 3. He told us this story recently for the first time. We had never really thought it was odd growing up, but our respective spouses reacted the same way he did that day. Still love each other. My parents now have been married for 34 and are madly still in the honeymoon stage. As I got older I realized how many couples are just partners, and while they probably love each other, they don't go crazy over each other anymore. My parents still don't like spending more than a week apart and still think each other are the best person ever. And if you're wondering, yes, it did give me unrealistic expectations for relationships. This is so cute. After reading so much crap and bad things in people's lives, it's so nice to see a good one. Have an upvote, and thank you. I hope me and my wife can be like this. They didn't show affection to each other, or us. No touchy. Dude, this. I'm so uncomfortable with intimacy of any kind, even platonic intimacy, because of how cold my parents were with each other. My dad wasn't in love with my mom, who begged for love. I still think it's so weird to hear stories of people walking in on their parents freaking because my only memory is my mom begging my dad for a kiss on Christmas Day and he said okay at 10 p.m. Whenever my mom would take us to the park she would bring a roll of wax paper. She would give us a piece to sit on so we would fly down the slides incredibly fast, especially on the metal slides. Never thought anything about it until I started working with kids and realized how insanely dangerous it was. My mom turned my social security number into a lullaby. You're just a number XXXXXXXXX. You're not special. You're just a number. That's dark. My mom and stepdad were hoarders. When I was young I always knew we lived differently than other people, but it never bothered me. As I became a teenager I started getting embarrassed and wouldn't have friends over, envied my friends for their normal living situation. They hoarded random crap like empty boxes and newspapers. We had an extra bedroom stacked to the ceiling with boxes of junk. We also had 11 cats and a dog. As an adult I'm far from a hoarder. I moved out at 18 and never looked back. In my family, we freeze our bread. We also put the bread we're not eating in the refrigerator. I don't know if it's common, but I've never noticed another family that does this. Grew all our fruit and vegetables in the garden, which left only a tiny space for a lawn. This is wonderful. My parents did this, and I always wondered why more people didn't do this. Have a lot of noisy fricking all the time. Not be rednecks in our podunk town. I thought everybody was the same or we were the less classy folks. I was dead wrong. All of my classmates have turned into white trash turds aside from the few that ran fast and hard away from their families as soon as they graduated high school. Same here. Mom, anytime anything was injured, told me it was time to amputate. I have a very non-concerned approach to injury thanks to that. Refused to pay for near anything I needed growing up, including school programs like debate. Thought she was really frugal even though she made lots of money. Nope. My 10-year younger sister is drowned in money. Dad, divorced when I was 1. If I spent summers with him he'd send me in the yard to play while he smoked. Always trying to smoke and get me to leave. Did not smoke cigarettes. Made me very hostile to people who smoked weed for a while as an adult. Freaking white trash. Glad I cut all ties with his family. Ha. My mom also used to ask me if it was time to amputate whenever I injured myself. For some reason I thought the amputation would take place at a gas station, so I was always really nervous when we would stop for gas. My dad would call police cars Ouija boards. I have no idea why. My parents were very good at turning each family member against every other family member. I thought all families were like that, until I saw families that liked and loved each other. I like to lie to myself and say they don't exist. I don't remember my parents ever saying I love you. If it helps, I love you. You're cool. It's what mine didn't do. They argued. In front of the kids, they never hugged or kissed. Even us kids. They never said they loved each other in front of us either. There must have been love, but it was never expressed. It's taken me half a lifetime to just now figure out how that's affected me and my relationships. I hear my boyfriend and his family say love you all the time. Every time they hang up the phone. Must be nice. It kinda stings. I tried it once and got weird looks or nothing back from my family. But at least I know that, if we have kids, they'll never go without hearing it. I also know it affected some of my previous relationships and friendships since I never knew how to express affection. Can you imagine when I learned that I should wipe my lady bits after ripey? I was 21. 20 because my mother, a doctor, mind you, never told me that I should. I don't know how I didn't get some nasty UT, because after I turned 15ish I just started using panty liners to stop ruining my underwear. So I grew up thinking that it's normal. I also thought that it's normal to take shower once a week and that my body is wrong for being unable to keep clean between the washes. So yeah, I was that stinky child in your class. Probably. I'm so very sorry. Spectrum disorders are a B when your parents don't give a dang. Post-divorce, my dad dated a series of addicts, went bankrupt, and went to jail for failure to make child support payments. I wasn't really aware of most of it at the time, but I do remember feeling very guilty and upset once when I was very young. 5-6 at most, and I suddenly realized that I had completely forgotten that I had a dad. Now I realize that I likely went months without seeing him and that my mom just didn't say anything about it. So I wasn't really at fault. But I felt like a terrible daughter and I think I still project a lot of that onto my relationship with him now. I'm always so sure he's disappointed in me or I'm letting him down by not going out of my way to spend time with him and make him happy, which can be pretty impossible. It sucks. It wasn't even until the last year or so that I realized what a train wreck of a dad he was at that time. I grew up just thinking he didn't show up most of the time, but at least he seemed like a good person. I used to be an extremely picky eater and at a very young age my dad would smother my hot dogs in peanut butter so I'd eat them. I grew up eating peanut butter hot dogs thinking it was a perfectly normal condiment. I didn't realize until high school it was weird as frick when I brought it up in a conversation. Got a few, hanging around naked at both the house and my grandmother's, along with the rest of my very naked family, never letting their kids have time off, having us always away on camp, school, extra classes and for me, physical, rehabilitation, even on weekends, eating out every weekend, almost always to a different restaurant, having both a nanny and a maid, raising and training dogs, survival and weapons training as an optional for their children. I took both. Hunting trips with my dad were always awesome. Having friend families, basically a family with kids within our age range, so we could go out on family trips, both families together. Having a violent schizophrenic mother, domestic violence from the mother side, a supportive and kind father. Edit, spelling. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun except for the violent schizophrenic part. Not my parent, but my uncle I live with. He howls, it's the best way to describe it. He stands at the bottom of the stairs and howls and moans for a good 10 minutes once every few weeks, usually somewhere between 10 PM and 1 AM. Thought that was just normal crap for a long time. I wasn't allowed to have friends over or be home alone, ever. When my mom cleaned, I had to sit in a chair in another room and not touch anything until she was done. This was daily. I also couldn't walk on the vacuum lines in carpeted rooms, or sit on the couch. She bathed me till I started my period at 12 because you won't clean yourself right. Then I was forced to tiptoe to my room so my feet wouldn't get dirty. I wasn't allowed to sleep with my bedroom door closed. She had my grandmother babysit me till I was 16. I was not allowed to do extracurricular activities through school, and when I did I had to fund it myself, even in junior high. Related side note, yes, I've been to therapy. My parents each made a pretty good amount of money, but I always thought we were poor. I also thought every poor person paid off their cars 2-ish years after purchase, paid off their house 7-ish years after purchase, had paid off rental houses, etc. I remember my dad taking the change from my pockets while doing laundry so he could afford to buy a cup of coffee. Not sure where their spending habits came from, but I guess they could have taught me worse habits. I'm 20 now, my parents are 25-26 years older than me, and I always thought it was weird that they'd spend hundreds of pounds on TV shopping. Not like shopping for TVs, more like Billy's boot camp and bike pumps. Take me with them to sell drugs. I thought I was getting a Slurpee. My little sister is a human GPS. She directed my grandma to my mom's several drug dealers' house from memory. Hugs. By the time I was born, they had a pretty good sized house and it was paid off, along with a good chunk of surrounding land, 2 cars that were paid off, decent income, and to this day they always keep fully stocked fridge and kitchen cabinets, as well as keep it relatively clean and tidy. My best friend, I'd see her at her grandma's house, which was the same situation as ours. Fast forward to 5th grade, I go over to a friend's house. Tiny many rooms, but besides the kitchen and living room they were about the size of 2 or 3 coat closets. Fridge and cabinets nearly empty, and the house is a mess. I don't remember how I felt, but my mom says she remembers how I came home all stunned, saying stuff like their house, it was filthy, and small, whoa, gave me a new outlook on the way I was raised, and made me feel very grateful. One time a friend came to my house and she apparently said it looked like a mansion. My mother was unmedicated bipolar for most of my childhood. She would sleep for days on end. I'd rarely see her. Then I'd come home from school one day and she'd have bought something cool for me or the house. She'd be happy and smiling, and we'd go shopping and spend time together. Then it'd start all over again. She would also bring me to strangers' houses and leave me in their living room for a few hours while she fricked them. Usually women. So as a kid, it didn't occur to me she was probably smoking a lot of herb with them, too. Probably the murder in the basement thing, but we like to keep our traditions. What? One of the lunch staples in our house was SpaghettiOs with a side of peanut buttered bread for dipping. In my mind they went together like grilled cheese and tomato soup. I haven't had SpaghettiOs in a long time, so I'm not sure if it's as disgusting as it sounds. Tomato soup stew and peanut butter toast is a thing. It's called a Putney special, but SpaghettiOs is really taking some creative liberty there. My brothers and I were picky eaters. We refused to eat meatloaf, did not want it, no way, no how. One day my parents presented us with daddy meat and yes, we were amazed. Called meatloaf daddy meat a lot longer than I should have, and after the word daddy became weird because internet. My little brother was picky like that. My mom stuffed the meatloaf with salami and cheese in the middle, called it swamp loaf. Shrek was big back then, he still loves it. My mother used to take me to the doctors almost once a week. I was either autistic, or diabetic, or schizophrenic. Or maybe I just had the flu. I honestly thought there was something wrong with me until a doctor told me about the Munchausen syndrome, and he believed my mother suffered from it. The mother obviously got very angry and we changed doctor, but I stopped believing everything was wrong with me. My mother used to do that with me when I was an infant. She would tell people she needed money or medicine for my condition, most likely pneumonia. I didn't learn about it until my stepmother told me because she was reading my mother's private diaries. We would take 6-week-long vacations and stay with my grandparents in England every 4 years or so, and take much shorter vacations during the other years. I was surprised in junior high that friends of mine didn't have passports. Back then, companies were far more generous with employee benefits than they are today. Employees can accrue far more vacation time and carry it over several years. Similar, but live in England and holidayed in the US. I didn't realize how lucky I was until primary, elementary school when we were talking about our holidays and everyone else had been to Skegness or Inglemells etc. Cheap British shitholes, and I had spent 4 weeks traveling around California. It was weird learning that most people don't repair things themselves. Shower valve broken? Don't call a plumber. Don't even go buy a new valve. Take it apart. Find broken piece. Machine new part. Reassemble. Likewise, not everyone home cooks meals pretty much every day, and while some might have a garden, they most likely don't have tomatoes growing at the end of the driveway, or in several other key areas where there is the most sunlight. This should be more normal though. My dad separated pennies from other coins. He would put nickels, dimes, and quarters in one cup, pennies in another. I never understood that. Pennies aren't usually worth carrying, is probably why. My mom made us say bummy burp because she didn't like the word fart and even had some friends substitute that instead. My aunt was the same way, but she preferred poot. Go to church 3 times a week. I grew up in one of those little side of the road evangelical churches that aggressively toe the line between religion and cult, praying in tongues, faith healing, exorcisms, calling for revival, all that jazz. So we were at church every Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, for at least 2 hours at a time each time. Not only do lots of people not go to church, most of them only go once a week, and their services only last an hour. Same, almost. Also went to a private Christian school, so 99% of the people families I knew did too. Then I went to a public high school. Like my entire childhood, my parents are junkies. I thought that the cops coming over all the time was normal. I also thought that dragging my passed out father off of the neighbor's lawn and crap was normal, along with violence and the like. Like we once had a guy come and threaten dad with a sawn-off shotgun and me and my brother were like, cool story, just another day in the Miller's household. It wasn't until I actually made friends in high school that I found out it wasn't normal. I'm always the person at parties with the crazy stories. My mom used to hide anything with sugar in it. Also, she always had a stash of candy that we were not supposed to know about. It later became a stash of vodka, but that belongs in a different thread. Kept petroleum jelly by their bed. It was not for chapped lips. OMG this. My parents had the same container of Food Lion brand petroleum jelly on the nightstand for years. I always wondered why, because my dad has always been adamant that Carmex is the best chapstick, and then one day I realized. Bake bread most every day. I still think of those $1 loaves of bread from the grocery store as fake bread. I mean, they pretty much are fake bread compared to homemade bread. My dad used to save just about everything, from little wrappers to pieces of furniture. It wasn't until I was older that I realized these were tendencies of a hoarder. You have been visited by the wealth rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.